The most intolerant wins. The dictatorship of the small minority, says my man Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Such a big fan of Nassim. He's a thinker. He's a thinker, man. Get your thinking cap on if you're going to read this guy, because he'll challenge your assumptions. It's great. I love it. I wonder what Nassim would say about gravity. I wonder what Nassim Nicholas Taleb would say about gravity. I don't know. Maybe he says something about it. All right, let's keep reading because this is fantastic. It suffices for an intransigent minority to reach a minutely small level, say 3 to 4% of the total population, for the entire population to have to submit to their preferences. Further, an optical illusion comes with the dominance of the minority. A naive observer would be under the impression that the choices and preferences were those of the majority. If that seems absurd, it's because our scientific intuitions are not calibrated for that, and 100%. All right, so let's keep going. The minority rule will show us how all it takes is a small number of intolerant, virtuous people with skin in the game, in the form of courage for society to function properly. The example of complexity hit me, ironically, as I was attending the New England Complex Systems Institute barbecue. As the host was setting up the table and unpacking the drinks, a friend who was observant and only ate kosher dropped by to say hello. I offered him a glass of that type of yellow sugared water with citric acid people sometimes call lemonade. Almost certainly that he would reject it owing to his dietary laws. But he didn't. He drank the liquid. And another kosher person commented, liquids around here are kosher. We looked at the carton container, and there was a fine print, a tiny symbol of a U right there. I did not know that. Inside a circle, indicating that it was kosher. The symbol will be detected by those who need to know and look for the minuscule print. As to others, like myself, I've been speaking prose all these years without knowing, drinking kosher liquids without knowing they were kosher liquids. Isn't that interesting? That's kosher right there. Criminals with peanut allergies. And then a strange idea hit me. The kosher population represents less than 0.3% of the residents of the United States. Yet it appears that almost all drinks are kosher. Why? Simply because going full kosher allows a producer to not have to distinguish between kosher and non-kosher for liquids. With special markers, separate aisles, separate inventories, different stocking up sub-facilities, and a simple rule that changes the total as it is false. So right there, just that little thing. A kosher or halal meal eater will never eat non-kosher or non-halal. But a non-kosher eater isn't banned from eating kosher. Or rephrased in another domain, a disabled person will not use the regular bathroom, but a non-disabled person will use the bathroom for disabled people. Granted, sometimes in practice, we hesitate to use the bathroom with a disabled sign on it, owing to some confusion, mistaking the rule for the one for parking cars, under the belief that the bathroom is reserved solely for disabled people, but it's not. Someone with a peanut allergy would not eat products that touch peanuts, but a person without such an allergy can eat items without peanut traces in them, which explains why it's so hard to find peanuts on airplanes nowadays and why schools are peanut-free. Which, in a way, increases numbers of persons with peanut allergies as reduced exposure is one of the causes behind such allergies. Yeah, but the risk of peanut, trust me, man. Anaphylactic shock, if you have peanut allergies, trust me, Nassim. You won't be messing around with that in school. How do I know? Because I got kids who have had that, and I've had to give EpiPens on more than one occasion. They call 911. Let us apply the rule to where it can get entertaining. An honest person will never commit criminal acts, but a criminal will readily engage in legal acts. You get that? An honest person won't be a criminal, but a criminal will still engage in legal acts. Let us call such a minority an intransigent group, and the majority a flexible one, and the rule is asymmetry in choices. I once pulled a prank on a friend. Years ago, when big tobacco were hiding and repressing the evidence of harm from secondary smoking, New York has smoking and non-smoking sections. I once went to a lunch with a friend visiting from Europe. The restaurant only had availability in the smoking sections. I convinced a friend that we needed to buy cigarettes as we had a smoke in the smoking section, and he complied. And we can read the rest of the article here, which I'm going to do because I think this is classic. Hold on a second. 4 things. First, the geography of the train, that is the spatial structure, matters. It makes a big difference whether the intransigents are in their own district or are mixed amongst the rest of the population. And the people, if the people following the minority lived in the ghettos, with their separate small economy, then the minority rule would not apply. But when such a population has even spatial distribution, say the ratio of such a minority in a neighborhood is the same as a village, then that in the village is the same as the country, then the flexible majority will have to submit to the minority rule. Secondly, the cost structure matters quite a bit. It happens in our first example that making lemonade compliant with kosher laws doesn't change the price by much. Not enough to justify own inventories. All right, so you're not going to have a bunch of inventory solely for kosher. But the manufacture of kosher lemonade costs substantially more, then the rule would be weakened in some nonlinear proportion to the difference in cost. If it costs 10 times as much to make kosher food, then the minority rule will not apply. Muslims have kosher laws, so to speak, but those are much more narrow and only to meat. For Muslim and Jews have near identical slaughter rules. All kosher is halal for most Sunni Muslims. But the reverse is not true. Note that the slaughter rules are skin in the game driven, inherited from the ancient Eastern Mediterranean, Greek and Semitic practices to worship only the gods if one has skin in the game. Sacrifice meat to the divinity and eat what's left. The gods do not like cheap virtue signaling. I threw that virtue in there. Now consider this manifestation of the dictatorship of the minority. In the UK, where the practicing Muslim population is only 3 to 4%, a very high number of the meat we find there is halal. Close to about 70% of lamb imports from New Zealand are halal. Close to 10% of the chain Subway carry halal-only stores, meaning no pork. In spite of the high cost from the loss of business of non-pork stores. The same holds true in South Africa, where the same proportion of Muslims, a disproportionately higher number of chicken is halal certified. But in the UK and other Christian countries, halal is not neutral enough to reach a high level, as people may rebel against forceful obedience to other religions' norms. For instance, the 17th century Christian Arab poet Al-Aqatal made a point to never eat halal meat. In his famous defiant poem boasting his Christianity, I do not eat sacrificial flesh. He was reflecting the standard Christian reaction from 3 or 4 centuries earlier, where Christians were tortured in pagan times for being forced to eat sacrificial meats, which they found sacrilegious. Many Christian martyrs starved to death. One can expect the same rejection of religious norms to take place in the West as the Muslim populations of Europe grows. So the minority may produce a larger share of halal food in the stores than warranted by the proportion of halal eaters in the population, but with a headwind somewhere because some people may have a taboo against Muslim food. With the same non-religious kashrut rules, so to speak, the share can be expected to converge to closer than 100%. In the US and Europe, organic food companies are selling more and more products precisely because of the minority rule and because of ordinary and unlabeled food may be seen by some to contain pesticides and herbicides. Or it could be for some existential reasons, cautious behavior or Burkean conservatism. Some may not want to venture too far, too fast from what the grandparents ate. Labeling something organic is the way to say it contains no transgenic GMOs. And promoting all right, let's just keep going down here. I want to show you something. Promoting of genetically modified food via all manner of lobbying, purchasing of congressmen, and overt scientific propaganda, the big ag companies foolishly believed that all they needed to do is win the majority. No, you idiots. As I said, your snap scientific judgment is too naive. Consider the transgenic GMO eaters will eat non-GMOs, but not the reverse. GMO eaters will eat non-GMOs, but non-GMO eaters will not eat GMOs. So it may suffice to have a tiny, say more than 5% of evenly spatially distributed population of non-GMO modified eaters for the entire population to eat non-GMO food. How? Say I have a corporate event. The bankruptcy, let's see. All right. So you have a corporate event. Do you need to send a questionnaire asking people if they eat or don't eat GMOs? No, you just select everything non-GMO, provided the price difference is not consequential. And the price difference appears to be small enough to be negligible, as perishable food costs in America are largely about 80 to 90%, determined by the distribution and storage, not at the cost of the agricultural level. And as organic food is in higher demand from the minority rule, distribution costs decrease and the minority rule ends up accelerating in its effect. Big Ag do not realize that this is the equivalent of entering a game in which one is needed to not just win more points than the adversary, but win 97% of the total points just to be safe. It is strange, once again, to see Big Ag, who spent hundreds of millions of dollars on research with smear campaigns, with hundreds of these scientists who think of themselves more intelligent than the rest of the population, miss such an elementary point about asymmetric choices. Another example. Do not think that the spread of automatic shifting cars is necessarily due to the majority of drivers initially preferring automatic. It can be just because those who can drive manual shifts can drive always automatic, but the reciprocal is not true. What I completely agree. You can drive a stick and you can drive an automatic. You can drive an automatic, you might not be able to drive a stick. As such, having automatics appeals to everybody. The method of analysis employed here is called Renormalization Group, a powerful apparatus of mathematical physics that allows us to see how things scale up or down. Let us examine the rest without mathematics. Point. Once you have 10% or more women at a party, you cannot then only serve beer. Most men will drink wine, so you only need one set of glass if you only serve wine. The universal donor, to use the language of the blood groups. A lot of women won't drink beer. A lot of men will drink wine. And so you say, look, we got 10% of the population at the party is women. We're going to serve wine because women will drink the wine and will the men. The strategy of the best lower bound might have been played by the Khazars who looking to choose between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Legend had it that the three high-ranking delegations, bishops, rabbis, and sheiks, came to make a sales pitch. They asked the Christians, if you were forced to choose between Judaism and Islam, which one do you pick? Judaism, they replied. Then they asked the Muslims, which of the two, Christianity or Judaism? Judaism, the Muslims said. Then Judaism was, and the tribe converted. Pretty interesting. Anyway, so lots of stuff in here to talk about meat eaters. Just such a great decentralized. Just love this stuff, man. Anyway, so read it. I think it'll be a good example for you to just kind of lay and say, why do the minorities have so much sway? It's nuts. And just think about the current system, LGBT. So very, very few people are LGBTQ, whatever the hell it is. Very few people. But you're like, well, the people who are LGBTQ are LGBTQ. The people who are not are not. So what happens is if we focus on LGBTQ, that doesn't exclude this huge group of people. But if we focus on this huge group of people, that excludes the LGBTQ, or whatever category it is. I don't care. So saying we're just open for everybody because that means these people, even if they're a minority, can still belong, and these people can still belong too. But if we just focus on this one, a small minority doesn't belong. That might not seem like a big deal, but when you factor in the fact that we want to appeal to 100% of the population, you're going to appeal to everybody. Which is why I never understood why the media is so anti-conservatism. It's weird, man, because they're all playing the same number, and you got 50 to 60% of the population isn't being served. And so that's nuts. So what is happening there, the minority is in the coastal elites, and they're the ones dictating the rules for the rest of the country, which is crazy. But again, the tyranny of the minority right there. You see it all the time. I mean, just all the time. It's crazy. And we're just going through it all. I mean, just you look at the vax holes, you know what I'm saying, with the masks. The vast majority of it's just, I just want to be left alone. But they're saying, I don't want to be alone. I want to be seen. I want to be heard. I want to be virtue signaling. Like, all right, just everybody wear a mask to appease these people because they're loud, they're obnoxious. No one likes them, but just want to get off our back. You think those minorities don't understand that? To be a rabble rouser? That's why you... Remember they talk about 3%. How many of the people actually fought for America's freedom? Only 3%. So you had a third of the people were Tory, a third of the people were for secession, and a third of the people were neutral. All it took was 3% of the population to fight, and America's free. Isn't that crazy? 97% of the population did not fight. 3% did, and America's free. It's crazy. All it takes, which is why you've got to get involved in local politics, the minority rules, man. Not the majority, the loud minority. Stop turn your cheek, be so nice. Say, no, fight back and cancel these people. That's what you got to do. Because they're going to cancel you the minute they can. All right, we'll see you.